forgotten the love Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for this ummah? Have we forgotten the love Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for you and I? Have we forgotten the worry and concern Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for this ummah, had for you and I? Have we forgotten the favors and blessings we were showered with because of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Have we forgotten the wounds that were inflicted on the person of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of this ummah, because of you and I? Have we forgotten the blood that came out of the blessed body of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of this ummah? Have we forgotten the tears that rolled down Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's eyes and the tears he sallallahu alaihi wasallam shed because of this ummah? Today, we have forgotten the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today, we neglect the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today, we have no value for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have no value for his sunnah. My brothers, today, we neglect the rights of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask you, did Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever forget you once?
Was very awe-inspiring when you saw him. He was monumental, grand in nature. His face was like a moon on Laylat al-Badr that had a light coming out of it like the moon on Laylat al-Badr. His color was a middle color. Lam yakun amhaq. He wasn't pasty white and he wasn't black. He was a color like what we call the harvest moon. And his hair was neither straight nor curly. It was wavy. It was middle. Everything about him was middle. He didn't speak slow and he didn't speak fast. He spoke in a moderate tone. His words were neither too short nor were they excessive, but they were always just right. When he spoke, people felt as if exactly the right amount of words were used. Everything about him was moderation. He had a full head, and his hair was wavy. If he parted it, then it parted. It never went past the lobes of his ears if he allowed it to go long, because sometimes he would cut it for ibadah, like the umrah or the hajj when he shaved. But when he let it, it went to the lobes of his ears, and in some riwayah, just above the shoulder. He had a large forehead, which in physiognomy traditionally was an indication of high quality. And then his eyebrows, they were full, and there was a slight space between them. And then he had a vein on his forehead that if he got upset, they could see the vein. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The upper part of his nose was aquiline, so he had a beautiful nose that had like a bridging on the upper part. And his eyes were very dark. Sahal al-Khaddain. He had a high, beautiful cheek. He had a mouth that was full, so that when he spoke, his pronunciation was perfect. His teeth were beautiful. There was slight space in the teeth. He had a light hair on his chest. His neck was like a gazelle's neck. He had a beautiful neck and a high neck. It had like a beautiful, like a silvery clarity to it. He was balanced in all of his outward aspects. Badinan, he had a strong build, mutamasikan, and it was all perfectly formed. His stomach and his chest were equal. He never had a large stomach. He had no paunch. Even when he was in his 60s, his stomach was always flat. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli alayhi. His shoulders were broad, and he had a large bone. Also his trachea, where it met there was space. And then he had a light hair also on his stomach. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ariyat Tajjain, he had no hair over his breasts. He had hair on his arms and some on his shoulders and the upper part of his chest. And he had large, full hands, and he was strong. Limbs were strong, but his feet were so smooth that water would pour off. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then when he walked softly, quick-paced. When he looked to somebody, he didn't just turn like this, he moved his entire body, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to give full attention to that person. He looked more at the ground than he did up. His glance was generally down because of the power of his glance. And then most of his looking was mulahadha. When he looked at people, he didn't maintain his stare. He would look and then move away. So as he looked at people, he never fixed his focus on people because of the effect that would have on the people. He was always grief-stricken. What that means is that if you looked at him, like if you saw him in the mosque, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, if you saw him in the mosque and you looked at him, you would think that he was grief-stricken because the istighraq, his presence with his Lord was so intense that his face would have a sense of being completely absorbed in thought. He smiled. He always looked at people and smiled and made them feel joyful. He never made people feel depressed. He laughed at things that they laughed at. And Aisha said, كَانَ مَزَّاحًا فِي الْبَيْتِ. He was always joking with us in the house. I joke, but I never tell a lie in my jokes. Always I speak the truth. A man came to me, he said, Ya Rasulullah, أَعِرْنِي جَمَلَكَ. Let me borrow a camel. He said, أُعْطِيكَ وَلَدَ نَاقَةٍ. I'll give you a baby of a she-camel. He said, what would that benefit me, a baby of a she? Because he wanted to ride it. He said, doesn't every camel, isn't that a baby of a she-camel? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then another time, a woman, Ajuz, came up to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, أَأَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةِ? Am I going to go to paradise? He said, لَا تَدْخُلَنَّ الْجَنَّةِ Ajuz. Old women don't go to paradise. And she became so upset. And then he laughed and said, سَتَدْخُلِنَّ شَابَّةً. You're going to go in young and youthful. And then she was happy. Another time the Prophet ﷺ, he laughed at things. One man came to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, halaktu. He said, ماذا حدث؟ وقعت زوجتي في رمضان. I slept with my wife in Ramadan. And I made an oath that I wouldn't. And I hadn't made the takfir. Because in Sharia you have to make the kafara if you do a dhihar or the ilah or anything that prohibit a man from a wife. He said, what did you do? ما حملك على ذلك? What made you do that? He said, Ya Rasulullah, رأيت بياض حجليها في القمر فوقعت عليه. He said, I saw my wife in the moonlight and I couldn't help myself. And the ضحك Rasulullah. He laughed at the man. He said, لا تفعل ذلك. كفر. Go and do your the expiation. دائم الفكرة. He was always reflecting. He didn't take rest like other people. He was concerned about his ummah. He never spoke about anything that was unnecessary. He had long periods of silence. He used to open his words and close them with a full expression when he spoke. He spoke with comprehensive words, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He never had excess. He was never of a loss of words. He had soft and gentle character. Jamith al-akhlaq. He was not harsh. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam was not harsh. فَبِرَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُ. It's by a mercy of your Lord that you were gentle. And if you were harsh-hearted, they would have fled from around you. He wasn't gruff or harsh ever. He always elevated the blessing, even if it was a minute blessing. He never found fault in anything, even a small amount of food. Any type of food that was given to eat, he didn't find fault in it. If he got upset, it never put him in a state of agitation. There was never a time when a right was presented to him except that he would go to fulfill that right. He never got upset for himself. He didn't point with his finger, he pointed with the whole hand. And he would say, Subhanallah, yaqribu kafu, Subhanallah, idha ta'ajjaba. If he spoke, he would put his right thumb into his left palm, like that when he was speaking. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Most of his laughing was smiling. He rarely laughed the way most people laugh. He smiled. But when he smiled, his teeth were like hailstones. And he would always occupy people in what benefited them and the ummah. And he would ask about them. And he would ask about news about them. How are they doing? And how so-and-so? And if كَانَ يَتَفَقَّدُ أَصْحَابُهُ, if somebody wasn't there, he would say, where's so-and-so? And the old woman who used to clean the masjid, she used to sweep the masjid out. And one day she died, they buried her. And he came, he said, where's that woman that used to, she was a black woman. Where's the woman who used to sweep the masjid? They said, she died, Ya Rasulullah. He said, why didn't you tell me she died? You know, why didn't you tell me she died? To go pray on her. Well, she's insignificant. And he would actually ask people, tell me, if you know anybody in need, come and tell me about them so I can help them. And then he told them that those people who help other people who are not able to go and get help, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make firm their feet on the day of judgment. You know, looking after people, just taking care of people, this is all just, it's like he's just teaching people how to be human beings. I mean, this is all it is. You know, we're just learning how, it's like human beings don't know how to be human. You know, this is the whole point. This is all just to teach you just to be human beings.
He loved to go up to the mountain go up into the cave of Hira and contemplate the situation that his people and humanity was in. And on that mountain, the Prophet ﷺ, you can imagine the fear that comes to a person when you're just alone in a cave on the top of a mountain and then a man appears. And so he's on, and then the man is telling him to read. And so the Prophet ﷺ said to him, he said, I can't read. And a lot of people forget this part about that story, and many of you are familiar with it. Jibreel alayhi salam, Angel Jibreel, he grabbed the Prophet ﷺ and he squeezed him. And he pressed him so hard. So not only the fear of seeing that person there, but he pressed him so hard until the Prophet ﷺ said, I felt I was going to die. And then he let go of him. And then he said, read. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I can't read. And then he squeezed him again until the Prophet ﷺ said that I felt I was going to die. And then he said to him, read. He said, I can't read. And then he pressed him again until he felt he was going to die. And then Jibreel alayhi salam told him, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. And so the Prophet ﷺ, as he was walking away, and he saw Jibreel in this stance, in another point afterwards, he saw Jibreel in his original creation, covering the entire horizon. Nobody saw Jibreel, but the Prophet ﷺ saw him. And so he came home frightened. And his wife Khadija, she said, what's wrong? And he said, just cover me up. And he was shaking. He said, Zammiluni, Zammiluni. He said, just cover me up. The Prophet ﷺ was so scared about what had taken place. And in fact, after that, Khadija radiallahu anha, you'll see in the seerah, she said, Allah would never do this to you. Allah would never disgrace you or humiliate you, because you fulfill the ties of kinship. You're good to the orphans. If anybody needs help, you're the one who helps them. You feed them, you take care of them. You will never be humiliated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will see that for many months, Jibreel didn't come back until he felt that Allah was angry with him.